All right, well, let's get started. This is really fun. So basically, if any of you don't know, my name is Garrett Breeze. I'm a show choir arranger, and usually during this time of year, I'm busy going around, working with different groups and clinicking and going to competitions and all that stuff, which of course isn't happening. And so this was designed to sort of fill that void as much as possible anyway, just for there to be some connection to the show choir community and what's going on, and providing a resource to directors that are still trying to figure out how to improve the shows and keep working on things, even though, as we all know, everything's sort of a disaster right now. So we have with us today Brad Gardner, who is the director at Franklin Central High School in Indianapolis. And we have Shawn Miller, who is the director at Loveland in Cincinnati. And what we're going to be talking tonight is just sort of the process of revising and tweaking and working through your show and making changes. And you get a new chart from an arranger, and what's the process? What do you do with it? Kind of behind the scenes. I think that's when you get into it, that's really the crux of what we're trying to accomplish with all of these show choir competitions, right? As you go and you get this feedback, and then you teach your students, here's how we apply this feedback, right? And you're constantly working and progressing throughout the season. Otherwise, we just have one contest and be done, right? But most people do 4 or 5, some people even do 6, 7, 8 contests in a season. And so figuring out how to make that a valuable learning experience, but also just a valuable musical one as well. And so Brad and Shawn are 2 directors that I happen to have worked with a lot. And one of the things that I've always admired about your shows is that they change from week to week. You can see obvious things and additions and new elements that have been added in, but they're not the story shows or the complicated theme shows. It's just music for music's sake for the most part. And so the changes you're making are simply because musically that made sense for the show, right? For the pacing of the show, that sort of thing. So I thought that would be really great to just hear your perspective on what you do. So let's jump in with you, Shawn. Do you just want to kind of give us the bird's eye view of how this fits in with your teaching philosophy, how you think about it, how you approach this process?
Well, the first thing that one of our biggest philosophies is we try to be as true to style as we possibly can. And the really fun thing about that is a lot of those things are hard to put down on pen and paper. And so when we start digging into the music, we start digging into style. The fun thing from week to week is, we try to tell our students, and we try to teach them that music is something that's always evolving and something that's always changing, and that's not stagnant. And just the ability for the students to, go into a scenario where we have an adjudication panel and we get all this feedback from these wonderful judges. And then we have the opportunity to take that feedback, go back to the students. I personally have my students listen to a lot of those tapes, and just so they get an idea of the things that are being said. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. But we're able to talk about that musically. And then we kind of take a look at our charts and say, okay, what's a spot where we think we can either change style a little bit, or where it needs a little bit extra help, and how do we go about doing that? So it's just something that I like our show to constantly change as the season goes along, because I feel that at some point the students kind of it makes their ears tired. They're hearing the same thing, they're doing the same thing, and there's only so many times you can say, okay, run it again, and get some valuable rehearsal time. So it's actually become a part of the kids. Expect things to change from week to week, and they expect us to be changing music. They expect us to be changing moments, and and at times we change the choreography right along with it. But it's just something that they become accustomed to, the fact that they know, at when we get started, break out the pencils, because we're going to be adding, changing, and modifying as the year goes along.
And they actually have the pencils.
Most of the time, we have a bag of golf pencils just in case.
To me, that's one of the most amazing things. So what is it that you do to sort of build that culture and that expectation? Because I remember one time I came in to work with the groups, and we were talking beforehand, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to change this and this and this, just because they're bored, they're not paying attention, you know. So it wasn't even some great musical idea you had. It was just like, we need to keep them on their toes.
Honestly, we had to scare them to death at least once. And then, you know, once they got accustomed to the fact that it's okay for things to change. I remember the first time that we had to modify choreography, and the question was, well, is Jared and Tori going to be upset? Are they going to be mad when they come back in? And no, they want us to make sure that it's continual and fluid. And that's part of, I think that's kind of a part of the culture we've tried to create, is that things are always changing and always growing, and we want to constantly be the best version that we can be.
Yeah. And I think there's some hesitancy too on the part of certain directors, and maybe primarily newer directors that are new to show choir, new to the process. You know, occasionally I'll get an email and it's like, you know, Mr. Breeze, is it okay if my tenors sing a different note here? You know, and it's like, yeah, of course, you know, but I think I think that maybe comes from just the way you know, classical music education. It's all sort of, you get used to this idea of, you know, the composer's intent is all important, you know, and if Beethoven didn't write a piano here, then you're gonna, you know, you're not gonna sing it any differently because he's the master, right? So Brad, why don't you speak to that? Like, was that something you were comfortable with as a new director, making changes, or was that something you had to sort of learn as you got more involved in the activity?
No, I was definitely not good at it. And, you know, those first couple years you're teaching, you are absolutely clueless and just stumbling through everything. And I was just like that along with everyone else. But I think just, you know, at first anything that I changed was out of absolute necessity, because like, my altos can't sing that note, or you can't hear them when they're singing it, so I need to put it into a range that works. So it's just sheer necessity rather than trying to make something more effective. And then I think the longer I've been doing it, the more I've learned that, you know, changing things can really, you are using it to heighten things rather than just fix problems. I say the place I learned it the most, or the person I learned it the most from, was from Paul Gulsvig, because he has come into work with our choir for many years now. And he, you know, does the whole show doctor experience where he comes in and he's like, I've got all these rewrites that are going to make this more effective, and, you know, kind of give you more of those aha moments in your show that you need. And so by going through that process with him so many times, I think I've stolen all of his tricks, or learned all of his tricks and stolen them, to you know, improve the product that you've got. And it's become a pretty normal thing. And I, you know, I totally agree with everything that Shawn said, that it's you know, you've got to get your kids accustomed to being excited about change and knowing that, you know, changes are making things better. And it also just makes the experience a little more fun. Keeping them on their toes is very important. And, you know, a lot of the times I find that some section of the show is just not getting to where you want it to be, and you work on the same thing and you've tried to attack it from so many different ways. And at some point you just go, we're just going to change it to something different, because at this point, if it's new, they're going to do it better no matter what it is. Even if it's not an actual improvement, just the fact that it's different is going to be the freshest thing in their mind, and it's going to be more impactful. yeah, so change is good. That's what I teach my kids. Change is improvement, and if you're not changing, you're not improving.
Yeah, and Brad and I have sort of this running inside joke, which is that no matter what I do, Paul Goldsvig is going to voice everything higher. And there was one year I was like, it's not going to happen this year. I'm not going to give him anything to flip up, you know? And Brad was like, no, he still did
He still
it.
he still came in and did it, and
You know,
it somehow worked.
so I say that to be funny, but it's also true, right? Like there really is no limit to how much you can tweak and change things. But I do think there is, well, I don't know. Let me ask you, do your kids respond better? Either one of you can take this. Do your kids respond better to sort of gradually giving them the changes, or is it better to kind of just throw them into the deep end all at once?
Shawn, you can go first.
Oh, for us, I just throw it at them. I mean, that we and it's usually in a rehearsal and we're just going. I'm like, all right, we're gonna do this, write this in. Okay, let's go through it. Okay, let's run it. And they're very accustomed to the fact that we throw things at them. And then they learn very quickly that they don't really want to talk, they just want to do it. And so I think at times just giving it to them, say, okay, tenors, we're going to do this. Let's try this. Nope, that didn't work. Let's try this instead. And then, continuing to work it until we hit something that feels good. They just want it.
So do they respond well to the trial and error? I mean, if you try something and it doesn't work, does that make them discouraged, or does that help them understand the process?
Well, I'm the first one to let them know that it doesn't work. If we're trying something and I mean, and I have this grand idea in my head when I'm sitting at the piano, it sounds like it's just going to be, oh, this is going to be the best thing ever. And then we try it and it just falls flat. I always tell them, like, okay, guys, you know what? It didn't work. I thought it would work. It didn't work. So let's go back to the drawing board.
I find that my kids are not good at accepting changes at the beginning of the year and the beginning of the season, because they're still, when you're still getting the show up and on its feet, that's when I am a director I'm realizing all the things that I want to change, and I'm trying to get toward, as many things as possible, as good as possible, as fast as possible. And then that's when they're really bad at it, because they're still thinking about, like, I don't even really know my choreography yet, or I don't feel comfortable with this, and you're changing things. And then as the season goes on, they get used to the process of change and they get better at it. But my kids are bad at it at first, and then they start getting it.
Yeah, and we don't usually, it usually takes, once we go to that first event, that we feel that everything is settled in the way we want it to settle in, that then we start addressing the sections, like, okay, now we got it now. And then we go back to, like you were saying, Brad, that with Paul, now it becomes that show doctoring aspect of, okay, this section just doesn't seem right. Let's see if we can find that and fix that.
So walk me through the process on your end. You get a new arrangement from somebody, or you buy a chart from JW Pepper, and what's your process for going through it and figuring it out? Is it in rehearsal with the kids? Is it at home with the piano? I mean, how do you evaluate the music and figure out your goals for it and where you want it to go?
Brad, go for it.
I don't think I'm that great at looking at an arrangement or even playing through one and realizing what's really going to work and what's really not. I mean, with Garrett, with our process, I always do send back revisions, but I think I'm not especially great at seeing it before it gets on the kids. And so I always find that once I'm actually putting it on them and having them sing it, and that's when I figure out all the things that don't really work, or that need to be tweaked to make things better. We have a question. Herschel.
You're muted.
You're muted, Herschel.
Herschel, come back.
Hello.
You're muted.
Am I back? Am I here?
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go.
Yeah.
That was the first time Herschel was speechless.
So sorry. I've been talking the whole time. Do you find that you wait until it's already been choreographed before you do that? Or is it just usually in the vocal thing? Because I find often that what the changes happen is because of what the movement looks like as well for like the whole picture. So do you wait until it's choreographed, or is it just on the vocal side?
For us, it's always after it's choreographed, because we always do our charts really late. Typically, we're usually we usually have charts before it's choreographed, but the beginning of the year we're working on a different show entirely. We're working on a fall fun show, and so usually it's getting choreographed and we're learning parts at the same time. So it's we never have our full vocal set done before Jared and Tori come in. So it's always afterwards. And usually we really don't make a whole lot of changes until after. For us, it's like Beaver Creek, which is the second week in January. It's always snowing and cold. But we go there, and I just want the kids to feel great about the work that they've done. And then once they feel comfortable with once they're comfortable in their skin, then we change everything. Then we go about just doing some changes.
Mine's always choreographed before I'm able to implement many vocal changes, because it's usually I've got the chart and I know that the bones of the chart are what we want it to be, and it's going to be what needs to be choreographed. Not that that's not going to change, because it probably does change at some point, but it's able to be just calendar wise. I need it to get choreographed at this time. And then usually a lot of vocal changes happen after that.
Well, and I think at every point in the process, you sort of see new things, right? At first you have your vocal rehearsals, you're hearing one thing, but then you add choreo to it, and all of a sudden it has a different context, and then you put costumes on it, and you see more things you need to change, and then you put the band with it, and you keep doing all these different, you add all these other elements to it, and so it makes you look at it at a different angle.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that, I'm both Shawn and I at Loveland and Franklin Central are blessed to work with really good choreographers in Jared Voss and Tori Brendis, who's on this Zoom. And so I have to say nice things about her, of course. But they're wonderful, and they're very musical in their approach. And so they are already thinking dynamically and about the music that's going on, and they're very connected to the music. So it's not just movement for movement's sake, and then that makes you change your dynamics. It's kind of like they've foreseen all of that. So it for me at least, it usually the choreo is not telling me to change much of the vocal, because I feel like they've already approached it musically. But I don't know, that's probably not the case with everybody.
Well, why don't you guys give some examples? Like, what are some things that you typically change? What are some of your tricks? Just give away all your secrets.
Never. I don't know. I mean, some easy ones are like, make sure that when there's a sense of growth into a dance break. So like when you're going to be kicking it into the band is absolutely blasting and you're building up this huge moment, make sure that you're, voicing it so that it ends on a huge chord that puts everyone in a real great high money range to, kick in a dance break. That's one really easy trick that I when I'm judging, I say that all the time. I'm like, well, you just had this friend down on some note that no one can even hear you phonating, and your band is crescendoing into their dance break, so we lost you, and it didn't feel like you excited me into that dance break. It kind of let me down, and then the dance break happened. That's one. That's a one for free, okay? But everyone knows that, right?
One thing that I love to do is playing with rhythms, especially if you have um, another verse that comes in and it's very similar, or you have a little bit of a repeating phrase that just hits and hits and it hits all the same time. You don't want to hear it the same way 4 times in a row. So just, shifting the rhythm just a little bit, or creating a little bit of sense of urgency, or just something so that when you hear it the next time, you're not like, oh yeah, there we go again. Yeah, there we go again. Especially building towards the end of the piece, anything that you can do to make it feel unique as you grow to the end. It always just gives it a little bit of a fresh feel. And if you can match choreography or play with the band a little bit where they're doing something different there, it's always fun. But for us, it's rhythm. A lot of times stacking some chords, or even ending chords that are made for just one measure. Milk it out a little bit longer. Maybe do a weird inversion of the chord, and then blow into the next section, and it just builds drama, which is not what show choir is about at all.
Yeah, I would want to add on to what Shawn said. I think that sometimes what you're trying to create these special moments in your show that really stick out and are impactful and moving and help you communicate what's going on in the song. And sometimes that just requires changing, like, I need an extra measure here that doesn't fit this phrase normally, or I just need a couple extra, like, a random 2/4 measure to like make this breathe before we move on to the next thing, which is also, it's all okay. In the end, it's all gonna, if you put enough thought and energy into it, it will work, and it's always a trial and error and thinking about things a lot before you actually plug it in. But yeah.
And I think too, giving things space and like Shawn was saying, changing the rhythms, I think that can help with a lot of diction problems too, because you might have a word that's, a lot harder for 50 people to sing than it is for one person. I mean, when we approach these arrangements, we're always sort of starting with the original in mind, right? And I know, Brad, you're very much a fan of sticking to the original artist rhythms, but sometimes they're singing, the emphasis is wrong, the way that they're singing it, and you can change a rhythm slightly, and all of a sudden it just sits better diction wise with the choir too. Yeah. So it's, there are some, I think there's some practical things that go with it, but those moments, those are the things that separate the really great groups from the just okay groups. Because I think the skill level for a lot of groups is right there, but it's just who's the more memorable, right? Who has these sort of impactful moments that really stand out. Do you have any practical thoughts on how you actually teach these changes efficiently? So you don't burn a whole rehearsal changing one line.
I do a lot of it by rote. So I make sure it's in my music and my accompanist's music. And sometimes I'm even not good at that because I changed it on the fly and I wasn't paying attention and didn't write it down. But it's a-okay to teach things by rote, especially once they're out of music. If they have the song memorized and they're singing and dancing it, they're going to do a lot better making a change when they can connect it to the movement than looking back at 10 steps back where they were looking at it on a piece of paper. So I do a ton of mine once we're up and running. I teach it by rote, and they become accustomed to that and are ready to change things. Doesn't mean you don't have to reinforce it, but because habits are hard to break. But I do a lot of it by rote.
Yeah, same here. And I have to admit, I do a lot of those changes in warm-up rooms. It's you know, we're sitting there, the kids performed on the day, and then you start, oh, well, maybe, you know, we could try this, we try this. And then the kids get in there and I'm like, okay, tenors, try this. Okay, let's sing it. All right, great, good, do it. And I find a lot of times that, and I think Brad alluded to this earlier, the kids start, they focus on that moment, and they actually become a little bit more free the rest of the show, because they're like, okay, all right, here we go. When we get into this song, this is what we're doing. This is what we changed. And I'll be honest, not everybody nails it, but you know, you get that in their mind. And then, and they even think of that moment as being special, because for the people who've heard the show, you know, 15 times, or if you've had the same judge for the past 5 weeks in a row, and then, you know, the kids get excited because they get to put something new out there. But I am kind of bad. I'm not good about writing down all of the changes when we get into things. And sometimes I even have to go back after the fact and kind of rework it just to see what I did. But it's pretty much, especially those things are on the fly, it's all wrote. Or we'll even have songs from day to night where we're like, okay, this really needs a solo, so all right, you're going to do this solo. We did that at Fisher's one year. That was actually to my daughter, and said, hey, tonight we need to change this, you're going to do a solo here, and then by the way, you're going to come back on the last 16 and wail over the top. Okay, good luck, have fun. And then we, you know, do it in the warm-up room. And I think our kids get excited about those things.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And sometimes, you know, that magical warm-up room between prelims and finals is the most magical time, where you can lock in so many things that would take an entire like 3-hour rehearsal. If you tried to accomplish them all in a 3-hour rehearsal, if you just wait and do it in a warm-up room, they will be able to do so much more so fast. Like 25 minutes versus 3 hours, where do you want to spend your time? And sometimes that warm-up room is the place to do it. I completely agree. Funny story, I'm going to chime in on something about writing your own changes in your music. So this year, our COVID plan for my choir and for our women's group at FC as well is a greatest hits show, where we're just pulling back a bunch of old charts because we know how we can make them successful really fast, and who knows how often we'll be shut down for 2 weeks at a time. So going back to all of those charts, when I sent them to Garrett to you know, knock them out for us again and just kind of revise them, I had to go back to all of our tapes and then watch our tapes and then rewrite listen for all of the changes to tell Garrett what to change from the last version that he sent us. And I was even looking at my music that I had that I thought was the most up to date, and nothing was in my music. I had to go back and just listen to everything all over again to send it all back to Garrett to actually add in, so that maybe I could start, you know, the year with some of the things actually in the music before I teach it.
Well, and I think this whole process is part of what makes show choir such good professional experience for those that are interested in doing music as a career. I mean, our goal as educators is not to create professional musicians, but I mean, for the most part, you know, any professional gig, you're going to have very little time to rehearse. You're going to show up, you know, maybe read it once and then you do the gig, right? Or you know, maybe you're in a recording studio and you're doing this exact thing where you're trying different things out and trying to figure out what's the right style, what's the right fit for whatever you're doing. So I think, you know, the educational side of it is really valuable, you know, for especially just mentally for these kids to be able to get out of their music and just hear things by rote and try things by rote and experience that. I think it's really great. Both of you do a fair amount of judging. Can you talk about it from that side, like from that perspective, when you're watching a group and you're noticing things that you can change, or maybe you're watching a group change from day to night? I mean, just what does that angle on it? What are your thoughts on that?
I think I've learned a lot from just listening to groups and just noticing, even listening to other groups, and then taking a look and noticing tendencies that we have as well, and being able to say, hey, you know what, it would be pretty cool if at this moment you were able to do this, or maybe we can take a breath from the choir and just have, hey, what if the ladies took this section and the ladies knocked this out? And then I've learned a lot about how to approach the show, and how to approach the singing from listening to other groups. And somebody does a great job at this. Herschel does a great job of listening and saying, hey, it would be a really cool idea if you did this here. And it's fun to play with things. And at first, I think Brad said this earlier, when you first start, it's a little scary to do that, because you actually want to just try to get what you have down right. Like, let's just keep banging away at this. But there are times which in watching other groups where you've been able to look and say, okay, I get it. I understand why you did this. Might be a little bit easier. It might make it easier on the kids if you tried this instead. And so I've learned a lot from, and the opposite side, watching other groups. I've learned so much, especially early on from watching, I remember sitting in South Dearborn Auditorium watching Franklin Central. I think it was Drops of Jupiter. Like, that was it was a great song, and it was a great take on it. And I thought, man, this is really cool. And it's really neat to see what groups can do with a song that we've all heard and we all know, but put their little spin of magic on it. And a lot of times it's great arrangers, and sometimes it's taking what a great arranger has done and then being able to do something special with your group. But the judging factor is great. I'm always concerned that somebody's like, oh, you're just saying that because you would do that. But I'm always really interested in what an adjudication panel has to say. And I always feel a little weird talking to judges afterwards, but it's not like, honestly, I could care less about how the contest went, but I just love to reach out to say, okay, you heard what am I missing? Because there might be something really cool or a piece that I'm missing that I would love to try with the kids. So I think the judging aspect it's been eye-opening, and it also makes me realize that the people sitting on the other side of that table, they're trying to give you the best stuff they can while they're sitting there. It's less about writing down numbers and more about sharing what they've learned over the years. And it's really cool to hear those tapes, and it's been cool to be a part of that. And hopefully I've said something intelligent on one of those.
Yeah. And by the way, that Drops of Jupiter chart, that was Anita, wasn't it? She's in here somewhere.
That was Anita, and she's in here. And it was a brainchild of Anita and Damon Brown. And Anita did a fantastic job on that. So Damon had a wonderful ideas to send her as well.
That was a cool chart.
Thanks, Shawn. I had absolutely nothing to do with that. My kids sang it. Anita wrote it. Damon came up with the idea. I taught my kids to sing.
Well, and I think what judges and clinicians and outside people have is most of the time they're not looking at the scores, right? They're just hearing it. They're hearing it fresh, and they don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And so a lot of times that can be really telling. Maybe you think you're doing this great, dynamic change, but it's not really coming through because they don't see it in their music. I always tell people show choir is not subtle, right? You need to make everything really obvious because there's so much to look at and listen to at the same time. And so you kind of want to direct people's attention as much as you can. But I think having a fresh set of eyes and ears just in general is important, because we spend so much time looking at it and thinking about what we want it to be in our head. And sometimes it's helpful just to like get out of that for a little bit.
I see that a lot in directors from the judge's perspective, where, or with working with the group perhaps, where it becomes, you know, the product that they have has become this, you know, it's their baby, and if you change it, you're telling them that their baby's ugly, and that's not at all what's going on. We're saying, well, we're gonna, you know, make this lovely baby even better. We're gonna put a cute bow on its head. I don't know, and you know, making a cut here, or flipping things around, or you know, adjusting things here or there. You know, the dots on the page are not this sacred thing that you can't play with and change. It's you know, do what's in service to the, you know, the audience. I like to think of it a lot like, you know, when musicals, before they hit Broadway, they go through this workshop process where they, you know, have a first product and they are continually working it around and scrapping numbers and replacing them with other things and re-choreographing things and changing this, you know, this song was originally by this character and it just didn't work. And so we totally kind of used that tune and put it on a different character and turned the thing on its head. And the process, or the product from where it started to where it ends and what you see in a final, you know, Broadway show has gone through so many revisions leading up to the final product, because it needs to be this collaborative, you know, organic process of finding out what communicates it the best. So, you know, I think training your kids that this is how professional things happen. You know, that they do change on the spot, and you do need to change things, and that's how we get, you know, the greatest musical experience.
So what are your guys' thoughts on the creative team and the role they play in all of this? You know, how do you communicate what you want initially, and how do you sort of, you know, if you get something that's not quite what you wanted, or not quite what you expected, I mean, what's that process like? Talk us through that relationship a little bit within the creative team, you know, the choreographers, the arrangers, you know, working with them in this whole, you know, process of changing and workshopping things.
Well, I'll be honest. I don't want to speak for Brad, but Jared and Tori are really good about throwing ideas, and I love it when yeah, Tori will send me a cool chart she heard, or she sends a cool arrangement of something, and you know, that's fun. I'll be honest. Prior to really working with Eric and you, Garrett, I did my interaction with arrangers. It wasn't really kind of cohesive in building a show. It was more of like, okay, here's the songs we kind of want. So it's been refreshing, that part that we've done the past few years, to, you know, get together and put all the minds together. At Loveland, I have a number of assistants, and they're awesome, and they put in their ideas. And we kind of formulate and just say, hey, what are some things that we think would be great for the kids and fun. I enjoy talking with the other adults involved and just saying like, hey, this is our concept. What do you think? Garrett and I have spent many hours on FaceTime, even this year, trying to build a show for the middle school. And then I think it was our third meeting where we both kind of admitted to each other, yeah, this isn't going to work. It was a great idea, but it's just, it's nice to have people to bounce things off of. It's nice to have people to bounce things off of who will tell you if it's not a good choice. And there are bad choices. I think sometimes we try so hard to make something work because we think it would be really cool, that sometimes we spend too much time on that and we don't spend enough time finding a solution. So I just enjoy having other adults that we can throw things around, and sometimes the coolest songs and the coolest ideas come out of places that you didn't imagine. And Garrett has I imagine that all the arrangers on here, you probably have so many songs in your head, you don't know what to do with yourself. You're a Rolodex. But it's just nice. It's just nice to be able to have adults to bounce ideas off of. I don't know how you guys do things, Brad.
It's a lot of the same, process that's collaborative, and I spend time talking with Garrett and talking with Jared and Tori, and my husband Kelly is really integral to the process as well, and has lots of fantastic ideas, and it ends up being and also just bringing in a bunch of other friends that have great ideas to ask them what they think, and it's a process, and it's exciting. It's also nice. So, Shawn, you were saying it's good to have people to tell you when you have a bad idea. It's also great to have, I know that one year we were planning our show that had the Come Look at the Freaks in it, and I just hated that number, and I was like, I don't want to do this song. I think it's a terrible idea. And it took everyone else on the team being like, no, it's going to be a great idea, and you're just wrong. And then I finally came around and I was like, all right. And then it ended up being fantastic. But you gotta have a team of people that's willing to tell you you're dumb and figure it out. So I'm lucky to have that, to tell me when I'm wrong. I need to know that sometimes.
So besides telling directors that they're wrong, what advice would you have for the arrangers and the choreographers that are watching right now?
Well, I'd say, it is a relationship, and I think so much of what we do in the show choir community is a lot about relationships. And I think if you can treat your relationship with your arranger and your choreographer as, as a relationship, like we're going to come to a final agreement on this, what these arrangements are going to be. It makes it everyone's way more invested than just a transactional business arrangement where I'm going to ask you for this product, pretty please, and here's the dollar amount, and please spit out the chart in the timeline that I asked it for it, and that's what I will put on stage. I think that it is so much more about communication and collaboration, so that it's not just one person's idea, going out there. It's multiple people's, and their arranger, they're putting all those notes on the page. They're working so hard to put all of that in there. They should have say in everything leading up to that. I mean, they're going to have so many great ideas about how to make it more interesting than you might as a choral director or choreographer or whoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the same. It's not treating somebody as an employee, but treating somebody as a professional, which is why we hire and why we want the people that we have, is because they're the best at what they do. I shouldn't be arranging a piece. I shouldn't choreograph. I shouldn't dance in front of kids. But it's, this is why we're really fortunate that we are able to work with the professionals that we do and the professionals that we have over time. And I think it's just, it's getting everybody invested in the kids that we have. And I think that's, and that's the one nice thing, is I think all of our teams and all the people on the team really want the best for the kids. They're not just coming in and trying to collect a check. And when you take everybody's ideas and you say your idea has value, that when you give them the value, when you disagree, you're able to do so in a fashion where they know that there's this mutual respect, and you can have that conversation, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and that's the value of surrounding yourself with good people.
So how do you navigate differences of opinion within that creative team, or even with, with a judging panel? If you have two different judges saying opposite things, how do you navigate that? How do you decide what to go with when you have all these different options?
Well, when it comes to a judging situation, we kind of have a rule of thumb, which is if one judge says it, okay. If two judges say it, it's probably something we should take a look at. If three judges say it, we need to definitely approach it and see what's going on, because like we all have differing opinions on some things, and sometimes it's, hey, what type of singing style should we use with certain types of music? What type of diction should we use with certain types of music? So when it comes to judging, that's kind of the way that we look at it. Differing opinions within our creative team. Honestly, I really feel like everybody on our creative team are friends, and we're able to have conversations. And so I never really like.
I mean, pretend me and Tori aren't listening.
No, I mean, listen,
It's a horrible process, and no. I mean, when you're surrounded by people that you're friends with, you should, and you have a good relationship with, it's okay to say to someone, I disagree with you. I just think that's not going to be the best, and you work through that, and it's okay. And like, I think we're all, at least on, I'm sure I'm speaking for Shawn as well, we're all on terms where we can just say, I don't agree with that. I don't see that working. Let's find something else. And then you get to it. And sometimes, sometimes Garrett says, nope, I don't think that's the right decision, Brad. And I go, okay, you probably know better. And then when we get it and it's on paper and we're happy with it, I might change it anyway. Who knows, because the next time you come back, it'll be something different, and it won't be even what I thought it should have been. It will be some fourth, fifth version of what none of us imagined.
Well, I think that's an important point too, because it's not like it's set in stone. So you can make a decision and you may change your mind in a week or 2 weeks, but that's okay, because your kids are used to adjusting, and that's part of the process. And so you have more freedom than, if you had one rehearsal and that was it, that was the show. Wanted to open it up for questions. Are there any questions out there from people watching? You can put them in the chat if you don't want to show your face, or if you want to talk, you can just talk. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Julie Rhodes is raising her hand so politely. Call on her.
I have a question. Hi guys, I'm Julie Rhodes. We basically have a fairly new show choir program. We've only been doing competitive show choir for about four years. We've had a little bit of success. We're here in Texas, so show choir is not just huge here in Texas, but we're working at it. So when you're a relatively new group, your resources are limited. You don't have a lot of options to have songs arranged because you just don't have the financial wherewithal to do that. What would you guys recommend for using, pre-arranged charts, things you can buy stock pieces, to try and make something a little bit more original for a group that's struggling with starting up?
Buy charts that were arranged for show choir.
Absolutely. I've used Garrett, I've used Anita, I've
for
used
show choir specifically. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
That's a great help.
Yeah.
I know sometimes, especially with my middle school group, and to be honest, the changing things really started when I was just doing middle school, and it was really out of necessity, where we had to modify things, change things to make things work for them. I think that you can always, especially when you get into stock charts, there's generally more verses than you need. There's generally there's generally an okay bridge that takes you somewhere, but there's always something you can do to give it a little bit more of a pump up section there. I don't know, there are certain guidelines that you're allowed to do, and that still follow on, that still, you can still go out and perform it in public. Let's say if it were video recorded, there's certain things you can do. I forget all those right now. I think you can cut out a section, but you can't put a section in a different place. You can omit, but you can't really add, and you're still kind of legal in that scenario. But for us, it started with out of necessity, and with the middle school, we would use a lot of stock charts just because of the expense. But I think it's great that you're looking at ways to make it exciting and make it fun. I do think if you can afford it, Herschel is correct in finding those charts that are already prearranged, and I would say even looking at different arrangers and contacting them and saying, hey, what do you have that's already arranged that we can get. We used to have for middle schools for a number of years, they'd kind of be Franken shows, where I would have a chart from let's say I had a chart from Herschel, but I had a chart from Brock, and there was an old Eric tune, and it was kind of a potpourri of arrangers that we would do, and it's a fun way to kind of be able to go and find something specifically that fits your kids and still makes them feel like they have an original show for them.
And then I'd say even within that, you've got a bunch of different arrangers, and they were probably originally arranged for a certain choir, and then you're gonna end up or ask the arranger to do it for you to tweak it to make it fit what your choir is good at. So I would say definitely don't be afraid of taking someone else's, if there's a secondhand chart that you can get a hold of and say, but I need to make this work for my group, and it's really written for a group that can do this, but I need my group is better at this, to say, let's, rework it to make it be what it needs to be. But we're going to start with the bones of something that was really successful already and designed for our art form for show choir. So it's, it's got, all the things that you're looking for of effect, and it's got a dance break built in and a solo built in, and it's not just the 4-part verse chorus bridge chorus.
Well, and I think picking songs that fit the right show function is really important, because you can always revoice something. You can take an SATB chart and make it work for 2-part or 3-part or whatever, but if you've got a song that's supposed to be your opener and it doesn't feel like an opener, I mean, that's going to be a lot of work to make that fit. And so I think aiming, when you're choosing from all these different arrangers, I think aiming for the right feel is what I would look for first. If you have a closer that kicks as a closer, but it's written for more voices than you have, it's probably easier to cut that down than it is to take a song that's not really a closer and try to force it to work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions? This is good stuff.
I have a question. What are the going rates for arrangers, and what do you get for an arrangement?
Garrett?
I don't I'm cutting to the quick here.
Yeah, I think most I think most people generally charge by the song. I think it ranges anywhere from 500 to, I know people that are 1,000 a song or more.
My question then is, what's the difference between a $500 arrangement and a $1,000 arrangement?
It's how good the arranger thinks they are. I don't know.
Well, you can get away with charging.
Yeah.
I think that's just also sad but true.
I mean,
if I can go ahead, Garrett.
Go, Herschel.
Well, like from my standpoint, I charge $500 arrangement, but I do that. I know I could charge more because people do charge more, and they sell plenty of arrangements, and it happens all the time. But I do it with the thought of I was a director for a long time, and I taught at a school that didn't have any money, and so it was very, very hard for us to do anything. And so while I do want to make my living, and I want to make a good living, I don't need to, for what I do, I don't need to charge more than that. But I'm also not doing, 200 new charts a year. And so I want to generate the business, but I also want to honor what the directors are trying to do and those kind of things. So I actually spend a lot of time to really think about, while I know that I could charge more, I don't really want to, because I want to make it affordable for some schools that maybe would not be able to do that.
Can I follow that? Can I follow that up with some more questions?
Yeah.
If you do an arrangement and then someone wants a rewrite, or let's just say you give them the arrangement that they wanted, and then the choreographer comes in and says, I want all these changes. And then someone else wants some changes, and then someone else wants some changes.
What I do is I just put it up front and say, you get one round of changes for free. Like, here it is, this is what it is. And they come back and say, Jerry's a douchebag and he wants to take out this and add this and do all this stuff. And so I'm like, okay, call Jared, yell at Jared, and then I make the changes. And then after that, if they keep coming back, then I have a deal that's $50 a change. So then I'm getting compensated for my time, but also that they're getting what they want, because ultimately that's what I want. I want it for them. I want it for their kids. All of us have sat on panels and been like, why is this song so long? Are we seriously going to hear another chorus? Like, why? And so, from the judge's standpoint, it's like, yes, please make it be the best for everyone.
Please excuse me if this is not on topic or anything, or maybe a topic of another session, but are people using Finale? Are they using Sibelius sounds? Are people sending out recordings at MP3s with all voices singing? What are people doing right now?
Well, I think most people are either Finale or Sibelius. The main reason being you have the linked parts function. So you can change something in the score and it'll go and change it in all the parts, which makes it really convenient. When you have to do a cut, instead of having to go through 12 different pieces of music and cut, you can do it once in the score, print new parts. It's not that big of a deal. If you want to transpose a song up a step, you can do it. Things like that are really easy to change. The technology really is quite flexible. Because you're right, some directors are like, is it okay if we take it up a half step? Is that a huge deal? It's literally one click of a button, boom, it's in a different key. So why fight your choir all season if it's sitting on a weird part of your voice? Just ask your arranger to move it. I think most everybody is using some form of MIDI. The Finale and Sibelius will generate audio files using synthesizers and fake instruments. I think most people are using some form of that. A lot more people have started recording the voices on top of that, especially this year with everyone having gone remote. And I think that's a good thing. And I think it'll probably stay once everything goes back to normal. But I also know some choreographers that like to teach to the original music because feels better. You know, it's got the drums and everything live. And so it depends on, you know, how much of a change you're making to it. If you're wanting the arrangement to feel like the original, then it probably makes sense to teach to that recording, you know. But if it's in a totally different key and you're, you know, taking the tempo up drastically, then, you know, it's gonna require, I think, a different rehearsal aid. I don't know, Brad, Shawn, what are your thoughts?
I love originals. I think learning to the original. So one of our big things is we want to be as stylistically true to the original as possible, unless we're taking a totally different take on it. And so we do learn a lot to originals. Garrett, you do a great job with your MIDI tracks, and they are more true than the traditional MIDI track that we get. But I think learning to originals, especially for the kids, I have to be honest, I think for them it's even more exciting to learn to the original, because you just get the feel of the whole reason why you chose the song to begin with. And there's some that we learned to MIDI tracks, and I think we did a number of choreography sessions this year with MIDI tracks, because we were using charts that you had already done, and some of those already had the voices with them, and it was good. But I like having the voices as a rehearsal aid, to be honest.
I think it's the choice of whether you're using the original or the MIDI version with voiced over, or like I don't have the voiceover, I just have the MIDI, is a lot more on the choreography end, because they need a teaching tool to use it while teaching choreography. And so I always defer to them, like, what do you guys want? Well, you know, and then I'll ask Garrett to take care of that for us.
But to be fair, both of you guys do an amazing job of then going back to what your band is doing and making it match what the choreographer did, so that it does match the chart. Because so often we see groups that are performing clearly what the original did, but the arranger didn't do anything at all. Like they're all kind of hits and stuff, and you don't see any of that, and it doesn't even feel like it, because they just did it to whatever Bobby Brown did. And so, but you guys take that, and whatever you're given movement wise, you then go back and add in stuff in the band and make it match the arrangement and make it match the choreography. And so I think that's where a lot of people, you said earlier, what someone goes from good to great. That's another thing that I think people do that go from good to great. They take that stuff and they're not afraid to go back and look at it and say, oh, we added these, we need to add some splashes here, or we need to, or whatever, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Well, I'd say that for us, or at Franklin Central, I know that Jared and Tori want to work with whatever the band stuff is going to be in our final chart. So they're always asking, you know, I'd like to work with what Garrett wrote with voices, so that I know what a choir is going to be sounding like on top of it, so that I can be musical in my decisions of making choreography. And if that doesn't happen, then Garrett's on the other end going, if they choreographed it to the original, I need to see that video, because I need to write in all the hits where they need to be to match right. You know, to match that. So, you know, sometimes it's not even the director, it's the arranger and the choreographer being in cahoots one way or the other, you know, taking care of it for you, if you're lucky enough to just be dumb and have great people working around you like me.
Well, and I've even made, you know, I call them the Frankenstein tracks, you know, where it'll be mostly the original track, but, you know, I'll actually just stick in 2 measures of MIDI because there's some hits here that they need to know about, you know, or like Brad was saying earlier, you know, the random 2/4 bars, you can go into audio editing software and sort of splice up the recording so you have the cuts that match. You can even change the key of it so the kids are used to hearing it, you know, in the right vocal placement and that sort of thing too. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be done with rehearsal aids to make it as effective as possible. Any other thoughts, questions?
I'll have one, just one question, and I'm not really asking for myself because I've been doing this 40 years. But if you are kind of on the younger side and still developing, what is the order in terms of song choice, arrangement, choreographer? Choreographer comes in, cuts things, wants things different. Just I taught high school for 15 years, loved it, and then I guess I figured it was fun to go teach college kids how to do it. What is everybody's thoughts on the order of producing a show in a collaborative manner?
Well,
You
I
mean like-
think
You mean
for
like
me, I
priority?
think
Like what's most important top down? Is that what you're asking?
That's a great question. By the way,
the cooperative side, I think, is the most important. And I think
Cool.
when you get to the point where you're working with people that you know and people that you trust and people that you have great respect for, I think some of the and some of the issues that I had really early on when I started was, as I was bringing new people in, they had their ideas, and their ideas didn't always match what my end goal was. And I think that the first thing, if you're newer to this, is find the people who have a very similar philosophy to you when it comes to working with kids and what your main goal is. And the I, I I think I can speak for Brad on this. The main goal of our programs is not trophies. It's not the main goal. The main goal is educating kids, getting them something that they can be excited about, and teaching them the passion that we have for music, and then taking that and surrounding ourselves with people who feel the same way. I think when you do that, you don't necessarily have the choreographer running in and saying, I want to change this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. I think that's something you can you kind of have an understanding with the people that you're working with. Early on, certainly had people who came in with their own ideas and ways of how to do things, and I guess that's probably not why I'm working with them anymore. But it's I think it's important to create the type of environment you want for your students, and then I think all those other things to me that have worked out. Uh, when there's suggested changes, when there's suggested this, suggested that, we talk about it. If it works, it works. But hopefully if you're new, you don't get discouraged with folks doing that. And I will say, remember, your idea of your program is the most important. And then you find the people who also have the same philosophy that you do.
Agreed.
Well, I think for new directors, it's easier to go through this process if you're using the prearranged charts, if you're using arrangements that have been written for other groups, or if you're using stock charts, because you give yourself a lot of, for one thing, you can hear it, you give yourself a lot of lead time to be able to edit and think about things before you start rehearsing. When you're getting stuff made for you, when you're getting custom arrangements made for you, the turnaround time is a lot quicker. You get it for a couple of weeks, and sometimes you're maybe surprised by what you get. It's not always what you're expecting, so if you're there, I think there's some value to that part of it, where giving yourself a little more time to live with it and to think about it, and to you can listen to a chart and know pretty much right away if it's going to work for the show that you're planning. Whereas if you're getting something made custom for you, there might be a little more back and forth to get it to where it needs to be. But it depends on the type of show you're wanting to do too. I mean, if you're wanting to do one of those elaborate storytelling shows, then it's probably going to be a lot harder to do that with the prearranged stuff. So it depends just on your, like like Brad said, you know, your goals for your program, what you want to do.
I think the other thing is that nobody in our community wants to keep it a secret. No one's like, they love kids, and they want people to be successful. And I think one of the things that's so great about show choir is that we can love our opponents. We can go to a competition and see what someone else is doing and cheer for them and be like, oh my gosh, it's amazing, what a great idea. And then ask them how they did it, and they'll tell you, because they want to be successful. They want you to be successful. So don't be afraid to ask them. Sorry, Gary.
I think the key is you know, taking ideas from other groups without copying them, you know, without being formulaic. Because, you know, you can see that a group did this really cool vocal moment here. You can totally copy that and put that in another chart, but maybe it's not going to be in exactly the same way, right? You know, so you kind of add to your bag of tricks, and if it works for your show and what you're doing, great. If not, you know, you can save it for the next time. But I mean, I've totally seen things in other people's shows and went, that's cool, I'm going to try writing something like that. You know, that's how we learn. That's how show choir evolves as an art form. I think, you know, if you would get into trouble anywhere, it would be like copying the exact formula, you know, for a closer from somebody else. But even then, it's going to be a different song, and so it's going to feel differently. So I think that's very much in the spirit of, you know, what everyone here is trying to do. Final words of wisdom, Brad, then Shawn. Advice for directors, advice for people getting started, just final takeaways.
No one has ever said that song was too short to a show choir. So cuts are great. Like if there's ever any thought of, is this too long, just cut it down, make a cut. That's my biggest one. I think we should make a plaque that says that and stick it on the wall of every school across the country.
Mine would be ask. If I would have started asking, well, I didn't know who to ask or what to ask when I first started. I didn't know where to start. And the connections that I made just going to places like Show Choir Camps of America made me realize that I can ask people questions and they're going to tell me, and not just tell me, but go out of their way to help me in many cases. Since as choir directors, I don't know where everybody is, you know, in my building, I'm the only person. There is no one else. And so it's very isolating. And sometimes you feel like you kind of have to figure out everything on your own. But the truth is, as Herschel was alluding to, I've never asked anybody a question where they didn't give me an answer. And in many cases, were willing to even share with me how they did things, or even send me a copy of something they did. I think it's just important for us all to remember that, you know, we might be alone where we're teaching, but we're not alone with what we're doing.
Shawn, that was so much nicer than what I said.
You can make a plaque out of that too.
I'm going with Shawn's answer.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Shawn. This was really fun. Hopefully, this sheds some light on the whole process for those of you that are new, and even for those of you that aren't. I think it's always valuable to hear other professionals' insights, and you know, opportunities like this don't happen super often, so it's really fun when we can all get together. This video will be going on YouTube tonight or tomorrow. You can find it as just youtube.com/PreezeTunes. We have another session next week with my track recording team. So we'll be talking about how do you record from home, how do you make practice tracks for your kids, how do you do virtual choirs, all that good stuff. That one will be on Tuesday. So we'd be happy for you to join us for that. And good luck to everyone with your season, whatever it's looking like.
Thank you, Garrett. Great to
Thanks,
see
Garrett.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
We are blessed to do what we do.
Amen.